Welcome to Things Are True channel.
They say prisons don't breathe. They are built of cold stone, locked steel, and silence. But if you walk the crumbling corridors of Eastern State Penitentiary, you'll hear it. The slow, damp exhale of something that has been waiting for over a century. And if you stay long enough, it will hear you breathing back. The first time I heard the name Eastern State Penitentiary, it was in a cramped newsroom in Philadelphia. I had been working at the Philly Chronicle for 2 years, mostly covering dull local politics, when my editor, Mark Bennett, slid a faded manila folder across my desk. "Something for you, Claire," he said. "Halloween season's coming up. Our readers love a good scare." I glanced at the folder. Eastern State Penitentiary, Historical Notes. The cover photo was black and white, dated 1923. A long cathedral-like corridor lined with cell doors, the ceiling arched like a church nave. "I'm not doing ghost tours," I muttered. "This isn't about ghost tours," Mark said. "There's something new. Last week, one of the night guards reported hearing things, breathing, from inside a sealed cell." I raised an eyebrow. "Inside?" He leaned in. "From behind a wall." I arrived 2 days later on a grey October afternoon. The penitentiary loomed over Fairmount Avenue like a fortress. Its outer walls were 30 feet high, the stones weathered black, streaked with moss. The towers were jagged silhouettes against a sky thick with clouds. Eastern State had been closed since 1971, but parts of it were preserved as a museum. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust and old water. The tour guide, a woman named Eliza, greeted me at the main gate. "You're here for the private access?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "The Chronicle." Her smile flickered. "Just stick close, and if you feel lightheaded, tell me." Inside, the corridors were colder than the air outside. Airy step echoed. Paint peeled from the walls in long curls. The cells were small, barely enough space for a cot and a toilet. Halfway through cell block 12, Eliza stopped. "This is where he heard it," she whispered. I waited. Silence. Then, a sound so faint I thought it was my own breath bouncing back at me. But it wasn't in rhythm with mine. It was slower, wet, heavy, like lungs filling with water. We ended the tour at what had once been the warden's office. Dust lay thick on the desk. A leather-bound book sat in the center. "This wasn't here last week," Eliza said. I flipped it open. The pages were filled with tight, slanted handwriting. Most of it was in English, but here and there, sentences appeared in something else, maybe Latin. The ink had bled in places, as if the words had been written on damp paper. One line had been underlined 3 times. "The prison is not made of stone, it is made of breath." The air around me felt suddenly warmer, as though the room had exhaled. That evening, I convinced Mark to let me stay overnight. If there was something strange happening, I wanted to witness it when the tourists were gone. By midnight, the prison was silent except for the occasional creak of old metal. I set up my recorder in cell block 12 and sat against the wall. Minutes passed. Hours. Then, without warning, I heard it. Closer this time. A slow inhale, followed by a low, rattling exhale. I held my breath, listening. The sound stopped. And then, directly in my ear, a whisper, "Breathe for me." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my tripod. My flashlight beam swept across the wall of the sealed cell. The surface seemed to ripple, like something beneath the plaster was pushing outwards. My camera recorded a faint vibration, a pulse. From inside the wall came a second whisper, harsher now. "I can't breathe alone." When I woke in the morning, I was on the cold floor of the warden's office, unsure how I'd gotten there. My recorder was gone. My camera lay in pieces. But there was something else. On the inside of my left wrist, in faint red lines, were words I hadn't written. "One of us." The skin was warm to the touch, as though the letters were fresh burns. Somewhere deep in the prison, a slow breath echoed again. And I knew, whatever it wasn't done with me. When I left Eastern State that morning, the sky outside looked pale and washed out, as though the world had been drained of color. The city noise felt unreal after the silence inside the prison. Every car horn and human voice jarred me back to reality, or at least what passed for it. but the mark on my wrist throbbed with every heartbeat. I kept the sleeve of my coat pulled down to hide it, not from the public, but from myself. Mark called me as soon as I reached my apartment. "Well?" he asked, eager. I told him about the breathing, the wall, the whisper. "You've been awake all night," he said. "You're sure you're not?" "I'm sure." My voice was sharper than I meant. "Mark, something's in there, behind the wall." There was a pause. Then, "I might know someone who can help you find out what." Mark set me up with a man named Howard Griggs, an archivist who'd spent decades studying Eastern States history. We met in the basement of the Philadelphia Historical Society. The air smelled of paper and dust. Howard's hair was white, his eyes pale blue and watery. He wore gloves as he handled a stack of yellow documents. "Cell block 12, he murmured, scanning the papers I'd brought from the warden's office. "You know it was built over part of the original structure?" "No," I said. "What was there before?" "A section they called the breath ward." I frowned. "Why?" Howard pulled out an old blueprint. On it, a section of the prison was shaded black, with the word condemned written in thick letters. "Because every inmate sent there," he said, "died of suffocation." Howard dug deeper into the files until he found a thin, crumbling ledger. He flipped it open to a name. Isaac Phelps, prisoner 849, convicted in 1911 for murder, sentenced to death. But his execution was delayed because... Howard hesitated. He couldn't stop breathing. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that even when his heart stopped, his lungs didn't." The ledger described guards hearing ragged inhalations from Isaac's cell for 3 days after his recorded death. Eventually, they sealed the cell entirely. "But you can't seal something that doesn't need air," Howard whispered. By the time I returned to Eastern State that night, the city was cloaked in fog. The guards at the front gate didn't ask questions. I'd been given clearance. Cell block 12 was colder than I remembered. My flashlight caught motes of dust swirling in the beam, moving as if pushed by an invisible exhale. I pressed my ear to the sealed wall. At first, nothing. Then, faint but clear, the sound of lungs dragging in air. It wasn't just breathing anymore. It was words, stretched and gasping. "Help. Breathe." I set my recorder against the wall and began tapping gently with a crowbar. The plaster here was softer, almost damp. Then, in the upper corner, I saw it. A hairline crack no wider than a fingernail. Something moved behind it, not a shadow, something pressing. The plaster bulged, flaked, and then a sliver of darkness opened. The air that poured out was wet and warm, carrying a smell like rotting leaves and copper. I lifted my flashlight toward the crack. What I saw wasn't possible. An eye, milky white, rimmed with bruised flesh, stared back at me through the gap. It blinked once, slow, and then the breath came again, louder now, shaking the wall. The mark on my wrist burned so sharply I dropped the flashlight. In the darkness, a voice whispered through the crack. "One breath. That's all. Let me have it." The pale, milky eye in the crack didn't move, just watched. "One breath," it whispered. "That's all. Let me have it." I forced myself not to inhale too deeply. "One breath for a name," I said. A pause, then, "Yes." I exhaled slowly into the crack. The wall drank it in, warm and damp. "Isaac," the voice said. "I know that. Give me the warden's name." It hissed faintly. "The taker." Back in the admin office, Eliza's hands shook around a thermos of coffee. "You shouldn't be in cell block 12 alone," she said. I showed her my wrist. The letters one of us burned into the skin. She didn't flinch. "There's a service level under the blocks," she said. "It's not on the tour map. I can show you." We descended into a damp, narrow space beneath the prison. A massive machine sat in the center, part organ, part lung. Bellows moved slowly, though no one touched them. A brass plate read, "Delaney Respiratory Calming Apparatus." Eliza's voice was tight. "The warden taught the building to breathe." I found a box of wax cylinders and played one. Delaney's voice crackled through. "Subject 849 continues respiration despite cessation of pulse. Hypothesis, the breath can be shared." The machine hissed like it agreed. On another cylinder, I heard Isaac, stubborn, defiant. "My lungs aren't a pantry for your shame." The wall behind me seemed to exhale. The mark on my wrist burned hotter. We returned to cell block 12. The crack was wider now, the channels in the plaster dark like veins. "One breath for your recorder," it whispered. Against Eliza's warning, I gave it. The recorder slid out from the crack, screen cracked but still recording. The last file was dated 50 years before I was born, and it was my voice. As we turned to leave, the whole cell block inhaled. The air pressed in on my chest, holding me still. Every cell door creaked in unison. "Hungry," the wall whispered. I didn't know if it meant for air, for names, or for me. Either way, it wasn't done. Howard spread an old prison blueprint across the Historical Society's table. "There's a hidden passage under cell block 12, he said. Delaney called it the Chapel of Isolation. It's connected to the breathing system." Eliza frowned. "A chapel in a prison basement?" Howard's voice was grim. "Not for prayer, for control." That night, Eliza led me through a collapsed storage room to a narrow crawl space. Cold air poured out, metallic and wet. We crawled down until the space opened into a low, arched chamber, a chapel. At the center was a cracked stone slab with a metal grill in the middle. Above it hung a wooden cross fitted with valve handles, each marked with a cell number from block 12. The air hummed, low and steady, like a machine waiting. I touched the handle labeled 12 to 14. It didn't turn, but the hum deepened. From the grill in the slab came a faint exhale, moist and warm. Condensation formed on the stone, spelling my name. Backward. Howard's eyes went wide. "It knows you." Eliza's watch beeped. "It's the time Delaney mentioned in his notes." The chapel inhaled. Above us, metal doors creaked open in unison. The exhale that followed was strong enough to make papers swirl off the floor. Names drifted out of the grill, not spoken, but felt against the lips like air shaping syllables. One of them clung to me. My wrist burned again. "Give it back." We followed the sound to cell 12 to 14. Its door hung half open for the first time. Inside, the plaster was smooth except for deep, branching lines. The respiratory channels. The air felt colder, heavier. "You can take my name," I told the wall, "but I choose what you get in return. I name you Choir." The channels darkened. The room shuddered. The wall whispered back, slower now. "We are not the warden. We are what the warden opened. We are the equilibrium." The seam in the wall closed. The air steadied. But as I stepped out of 1214, the cell block inhaled again, and this time it matched my breathing exactly. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the prison's inhale against my ribs. By morning, I knew I had to go back, alone. Cell block 12 was silent when I arrived. The air was heavy, like a room that had been holding its breath for hours. The crack in the wall of 1214 was wider than before. "You named us," the wall whispered. "Now give us what we are owed." My fingers brushed the recorder in my pocket. I'd brought it back, knowing they might want it, and maybe, part of me, wanting to give it. "What happens if I refuse?" I asked. The answer came as a slow exhale that chilled the back of my neck. "Then we take it." I set the recorder on the floor and stepped back. The crack seemed to sigh. The recorder slid into the darkness, swallowed whole. In return, the wall exhaled one word, barely audible: free. The air in the cell shifted, lighter, but not entirely safe. As I left, the voice followed me down the corridor. "We know the rhythm of you now. We can find you in any breath you take." I didn't look back. Outside, the city felt thin, unreal. Every gust of wind sounded like it was measuring me. Eastern State still runs its tours. Tourists walk the halls, laughing nervously, pointing cameras into the shadows. They don't see the channels in the walls. They don't feel the pull in the air. And maybe they never will, until the prison decides it needs another breath. I moved apartments, changed locks, learned to sleep with a fan running to mask the sound of my own breathing. But some nights, the fan's rhythm changes, slows, matches me, and in those moments, I feel it, the equilibrium, leaning close, inhaling. It hasn't forgotten my name, and it never will. If you ever visit Eastern State Penitentiary, don't stand in cell block 12 too long, don't match the air, and whatever you do, never give it your breath, not even once. If you found this story chilling, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more tales from history's darkest corners, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. If a place could breathe and remember every person who ever stepped inside, do you think it would choose to keep you or let you go?